before he became a name tied to fire bombings, bounties, and an inevitable execution. Sam Abdulrahim was a gifted fighter with a real future. Known on the streets as the Punisher, he trained in kickboxing from 15, turned professional in his early 20s, and later built an unbeaten 8-0 boxing record, winning the WBC Australian Cruiserweight title in 2024. But alongside that rise ran a darker path: criminal convictions from 2009, links to Melbourne's underworld, a fatal 2015 Ferrari crash that killed an 88-year-old grandmother. After prison, his life became a cycle of shootings, firebombings, and a reported $2 million bounty. This is the story of talent, choices, and a death that felt inevitable. The rise of a Punisher, from kickboxer to criminal. If you really want to understand who Sam Abdulrahim was, you've got to rewind the clock. Not all the way back to when he was born or some childhood storino. You need to start at the exact moment he decided the straight path just wasn't moving fast enough for him. Before the Punisher became a name people whispered about in Melbourne's darker circles, Sam was just a kid with serious skills, and I mean serious. This guy could actually fight. He'd been grinding in martial arts and kickboxing since he was 15, and by the time he hit his early 20s, he was boxing professionally with genuine potential. His hands? They could throw combos that made other fighters take notice. His athleticism. It could have taken him places, legitimate places, safe places, places where you don't have to watch your back every second. But here's the thing about legitimate success. It rarely competes with the pull of fast money, instant status, and the kind of street respect you can't buy in a gym. By 2009, Sam had already racked up his first criminal convictions. And these weren't just minor slip-ups either. These were bold moves. He was young, confident, physically powerful, and increasingly connected with people who lived outside the boundaries of the law. Now, Melbourne's underworld isn't some simple operation with one boss calling all the shots. It's messy. It's a whole ecosystem of rival crews, beaky clubs, and organized syndicates constantly battling for position, for territory, for control. And Sam, he was starting to get noticed by the right people, or depending on how you look at it, the very wrong people. The Ferrari moment. When everything changed, then 2015 came around, and something happened that would define the rest of Sam Abdulrahim's life. It wasn't a gang hit. It wasn't some underworld execution. It was a Ferrari, an open stretch of road. One catastrophic lapse in judgment. June 27, 2015. Sam was behind the wheel of a silver Ferrari Spider, cruising down High Street in Reservoir. That car was built for pure speed, and he was treating it exactly like that. The speed limit? 60 kilometers per hour, Sam? He was doing 110, almost double. Absolute recklessness. The kind of split-second decision that seems like nothing in the moment, and then completely destroys everything. He lost control. The Ferrari slammed into 4 other cars. And in one of those vehicles was Muriel Hulatan, 88-year-old great-grandmother, just finished having lunch with her daughter. The impact was brutal. Muriel suffered horrific injuries: a severed thumb, fractured ribs, a fractured neck. She spent 8 days in the hospital. Unable to speak because of her neck injuries, she could only communicate by tapping her foot. Eventually, doctors had no choice but to put her in a medically induced coma. They took her off life support. She died. When you take someone's life, even if it's an accident, something fundamental shifts. The weight of that never goes away. At 26 years old, Sam Abdulrahim wasn't just some promising kickboxer who'd made a few questionable friends anymore. He was now a man who had killed someone, a grandmother, an elderly woman who'd done absolutely nothing to deserve. Being in the path of his recklessness, the legal system did its thing. Sam pleaded guilty to culpable driving causing death. And in 2018, he got sentenced to 3 years and 3 months behind bars. But here's where it gets complicated. By 2019, he was already out on parole after serving just 1 year and 5 months. Now, you can argue all day about whether that was fair. You can debate whether he'd truly paid his debt to society, but what's absolutely undeniable is that what happened next completely changed the direction of his entire life. Released but not free. Parole board years, this is where things take a seriously dark turn. When Sam Abdulrahim walked out of prison on March 5, 2019, he wasn't walking into freedom, he was walking straight into a nightmare. According to his own lawyer, he'd already become a marked man. So he did exactly what the police told him to do. He changed his address 5 times in just the first few weeks of parole, constantly moving, trying to stay one step ahead based on official advice. And then, less than a week later, someone opened fire in a drive-by, shooting at a house on Barrow Street in Brunswick, the exact street he'd been paroled to. 2 months after that, his sister got targeted while she was driving a car Sam was known to use. Someone pulled up alongside her and pointed a handgun right at her from another vehicle. Then his cousin's house in Campbellfield got absolutely riddled with bullets. The adult parole board wasn't going to just sit back and watch. They made a call, they revoked his parole. Their reasoning? They believed Sam was the real target of all these attacks, and having him out on the streets was putting innocent people in danger. so they threw him back inside. For 72 days, he sat in prison, and nearly half of that time was spent in solitary confinement. And even locked up, he still wasn't safe. While he was inside, someone came up behind him and cracked him in the back of the head with a rock. Even behind bars, he couldn't escape it. But Sam appealed the decision. His argument? Legally speaking, he was absolutely right. He hadn't actually violated any of his parole conditions. None of these attacks were his fault. A judge reviewed the case and agreed, ruling that the parole board had overstepped their authority. Sam was released back into the community. On paper, sure, this looked like a win. But in reality, they were basically releasing a guy into an active war zone without giving him any protection. It's funny that these shootings happened, but I got an ankle bracelet on my leg, he said in a 2022 podcast. And you could hear the frustration in his voice. I was nowhere near the shootings, so they locked me up for no reason. The problem was, everyone knew exactly why those shootings were happening. And if you understood why, you knew what was inevitably coming next. The Kadir Orrs incident, a feud that changed everything here. What you need to understand about Melbourne's underworld in the 2010s. Murder doesn't just end in the courtroom. It creates feuds. It builds blood debts. It draws enemy lines that can take years, sometimes decades, to settle. Back in 2016, a major crime figure named Kadir Orrs was executed. Orrs had been a serious player in Melbourne's drug trade, a guy with deep connections and even deeper enemies. According to underworld sources that eventually reached the ABC, Sam Abdulrahim had been involved in Orrs's murder. Whether he pulled the trigger himself or was connected in some other way, details are still murky. But what's clear is that he was linked to it. And here's what really matters. Orrs had friends. Powerful friends. One of them was a guy named Kazim Kaz Hamid, would end up becoming Sam Abdulrahim's main enemy for the next decade of his life. Hamid blamed Sam for his best friend's death. And in the Melbourne underworld, that kind of blame doesn't just fade away with time. It grows. It festers. It turns into an all-consuming obsession. So by the time Sam got released from prison in 2019, Ahmad had already spent years planning. And now, with Sam back on the streets, vulnerable, exposed, and constantly moving, the cycle could finally kick off for real. Survival against the odds. The shooting that should have killed him June 2022, Sam Abdulrahim was at Faulkner Cemetery attending his cousin's funeral land. That's the same cemetery where he'd end up getting shot down 3 years later. As he climbed back into his black Mercedes SUV to leave, another car rolled up right next to him. Then all hell broke loose. His Mercedes got absolutely shredded with bullets. 4 shots ripped straight into his chest. For shots that, by all accounts, should have killed him right there. But instead of collapsing and bleeding out in that car, Sam did something that perfectly captures the kind of raw determination, or maybe sheer desperation, defined who he was. He drove himself to a nearby police station. Alive, conscious, bleeding everywhere. He survived. They rushed him to the hospital in critical condition, and somehow, against all odds, he pulled through. 1 bullet reportedly got lodged in his kidney. Permanent reminder that someone had tried to end his life and failed. After he recovered, something almost impossible to believe actually happened. Most people who survive an assassination attempt either go straight into witness protection or catch the first flight out of the country. Not Sam. He picked up a pair of boxing gloves. With his life still hanging in the balance, with people actively hunting him down, he went back to professional boxing. I know it sounds like something out of a movie, but it's 100% real. His record? 8-0. Unbeaten with 5 knockouts. And in March 2024, he won the WBC Australian Cruiserweight Championship by defeating Thailand's Pena Champhuaflong in Bangkok. Now here's the crazy part. That championship fight was originally supposed to happen at the Furland Club in Thornbury, but the venue got firebombed just days before the bout. So Sam, a guy with an actual bounty on his head, traveled all the way to Thailand to fight for his title, and he won. Think about that for a second. A man who could have spent those months hiding in some safe house was instead training, stepping into a ring, fighting for a championship, while his enemies were closing in around him from every direction. When former footballer Sam Newman asked him on a podcast in 2022 about whether he was worried for his safety after the shooting, Sam's response was almost eerily calm. Walking around worried? Nah, not really. When my time's up, I guess. Looking back now, that statement hits different. He already knew his death might be inevitable. What he didn't know was just how soon it would come. The escalating violence, bullets, fire, and a bounty. What made Sam Abdulrahim's final years so absolutely relentless was the sheer variety of attacks coming at him. This wasn't just one shooter making multiple attempts. This was a full-blown, coordinated campaign of violence. The attackers seemed willing to throw absolutely everything at him and see what would finally stick. By 2024, the situation had gotten downright insane in its intensity. In February, the boxing club that was supposed to host his fight got firebombed. In May, attackers unloaded 17 shots at him outside his Thomastown home, 17 bullets, and somehow not a single one hit him. In June, his house got sprayed with more gunfire. In August, that same house was firebombed. Then in October, a gymnasium connected to him in Brunswick got torched in what police believed was tied to the illegal tobacco war. 17 bullets. Just let that number sit with you for a second. Not for like in the 2022 shooting. Not just a few rounds from some random drive-by. 17 bullets fired at a moving target and he walked away. That kind of luck, or maybe that kind of tactical awareness and skill at staying alive, is almost unreal. There was another detail that made everything even more terrifying: the bounty. Sources told the ABC that a price had been put on Sam Abdulrahim's head by Underworld, rivaled somewhere between $1 million and $2 million. At that point, it's not even personal hatred anymore. It's business. It's turning murder into a contract that's available to anyone with the cash and the guts. To pull the trigger, police offered him protection. Multiple times, options were laid out in front of him, but Sam refused every single one. He chose to stay exposed, to keep living in the city where his enemies could easily find him, constantly moving between apartments and safe houses without accepting full police cooperation. From the outside, that decision seems completely insane. But when you're inside his situation, maybe it actually made sense. Police protection is visible. It announces exactly where you are. It marks you as vulnerable, as someone who needs protecting. Sometimes when you're living like a hunted animal, being seen with handlers is actually more dangerous than just running alone and staying unpredictable. Moment of clarity. Farewell, here's one detail that really sticks with you. 48 hours after Sam Abdulrahim got shot dead in that parking lot, his family held his funeral. It took place at a mosque in Epping, and the family made the decision to bury him in a gold coffin. They laid him to rest at Faulkner Cemetery, the exact same cemetery where gunmen had tried to kill him just 3 years before. Funeral notice read, "Taken too soon." Sam was a man full of life. He was loved by all, and his smile would always light up the room. He will be dearly missed, but never forgotten. That detail matters. It really does. Because it forces you to remember that underneath all the crime, all the underworld connections, all the violence and chaos, there was an actual human being. Not just the Punisher. Not just the notorious underworld figure that the headlines always called him. He was someone's son, someone's brother. Someone who apparently could light up a room with his smile. He had people who loved him enough to bury him in gold. Even though everyone in the entire city knew his name was synonymous with danger, according to people who actually knew him, Sam Abdulrahim was someone who was able to separate his criminal activity from his family life and sporting career. He wasn't completely lost. He wasn't some one-dimensional villain. He was a man caught between competing worlds, living divided between them. And in the end, none of those worlds were willing or able to protect him. The final chapter, why it ended in a parking lot, investigators believe. Multiple attackers were involved in Sam Abdulrahim's death. Police say they'll leave no stone unturned, which is the same thing they always say in cases like this. That white Porsche the shooters escaped in, it was found burnt out in reservoir within hours. Stripped clean of evidence, a ghost trail leading nowhere. Detective Inspector Dean Thomas acknowledged what absolutely everyone already knew. This outcome seemed inevitable. When someone asked if he was concerned this was just a matter of time, he said, "I think common sense prevails here that perhaps that's the case." The main suspect believed to have ordered the hit, Kazim Hamad, the man whose best friend got killed back in 2016. The man who'd been methodically targeting Sam for years, orchestrating firebombings and arranging shooters. But he wasn't the only one. Leaders from the Mongols and Common Karobiki clubs despised him. Ahmad al-Hamza, another crime figure, had allegedly been behind the 2022 shooting. The list of people who wanted Sam dead was long and getting longer by the day. What made Sam Abdulrahim's death feel like the final chapter rather than just another violent episode in Melbourne's underworld was the moment itself. It was brazen. It happened in broad daylight. It was in a populated area where multiple people were guaranteed to witness it. This wasn't some drive-by where he might have a chance to escape. This was an assassination calculated, coordinated, and carried out despite knowing that police were actively investigating him. Despite knowing he was under constant consideration for protection, it took months of investigation. The pattern becomes crystal clear. This was never about some spontaneous crime of passion. This was a planned execution. Multiple attackers, likely working together in coordination. A hit ordered by someone with serious resources and serious determination, and a victim who'd made the conscious choice not to run, not to hide, but to keep living right there in Melbourne, the exact same city where all his enemies were operating. The tragic irony here's the ultimate irony of Sam Abdulrahim's story. And this is why it matters way beyond just being another crime headline you scroll past. He survived that Ferrari crash that killed an innocent grandmother, and he spent years trying to make up for it. He survived gunshot wounds that by all rights should have been fatal. He survived firebombings, drive-bys, solitary confinement, getting assaulted in prison, and a $2 million bounty hanging over his head. He became a professional boxer and won a championship title, living under constant threat of death. But the one thing he couldn't survive was the simple decision he made: To keep living in Melbourne even though everybody knew from multiple sources, from every angle, that his death was coming. When you're a marked man, when you're being actively hunted, when you've got multiple crime syndicates with serious resources dedicated to wiping you off the map, survival stops being about luck. It becomes about geography. It becomes about disappearing, becoming someone else. Starting over in a completely different country where nobody knows your name, Sam chose not to do that. Whether it was pride, stubbornness, defiance, or just genuine acceptance of what was inevitably going to happen. He walked into that parking lot in Preston, knowing full well what the odds were. And that choice, in the end, became his final chapter. What we remember, the Punisher is dead. The man who fought so damn hard to survive all those assassination attempts, who boxed his way back towards some kind of legitimacy, who told Sam Newman flat out that he wasn't worried because when my time's up, he finally had his time run out. His story isn't about heroism. It's not really about redemption either, though you could argue he tried in his own way. It's about the inevitable consequences of the world you choose to live in, the enemies you make along the way, and the harsh reality that some fights just can't be won in a boxing ring. Because they're not about strength or skill or determination. They're about power structures, blood feuds that go back years, and the cold mathematics of someone, somewhere, wanting you dead badly enough to keep trying until they finally make it happen. Sam. Abdulrahim proved he could survive almost anything life threw at him. But he couldn't survive being Sam Abdulrahim in Melbourne. And that, maybe more than anything else, is the real final chapter of the Punisher story.